Hi, my name is Grayson Hill. I did my research paper on the misappropriation of American Indian culture through American popular music. This presentation was very interesting for me because I learned a ton about the American Indian culture that I had no idea of before, other than honestly, I'm guilty of stereotypes and movies, what you see in movies, and also what we've learned in history when we were younger. Um, in school, I always learned, how we discovered America. It was Christopher Columbus coming over. He was the hero. He, came from Europe, and we got this country, the land of the free. And we had always learned that the American Indians were the bad guys. They were the enemies, and that's why we had wars so that we could take their land. Um, and this class has really taught me that that was not really what happened. We overall were the enemies. We committed so many mass murders. We stole from them. We took ideas from their culture. When they were the ones here first, they are the ones who learned how to live in this land before we ever even got here. So it was their land. It was never ours. It wasn't discovered. It was stolen. So, but it was very interesting for me to learn about how beautiful the Native American culture is. They are filled with so much symbolism and meaning, more than any of our culture has to offer, and um, and we in America have so many stereotypes associated with them that just continue into our movies, into our music, mostly. It, as a matter of fact, we learned about all like a bunch of really popular songs from children's movies or artists that we know and listen to every day have horribly racist and culturally misappropriated music about American Indians. And there are movies about it. The Pocahontas, who was one of my absolute all-time favorite Disney movies, um, is not right at all. It seems like it's like a really cute movie about how Pocahontas like gets to go to America and falls in love with an American, and the real story behind it is just absolutely horrendous. It just goes back to what we did to them when America was discovered. Um, a lot of cultural misappropriation happens because of schools and what they have taught us, but also and that's just kind of how we learned as children, and that leads to kids playing, and I'm guilty of this also, like playing Indians when you're a kid. Like you play the cowboy and Indians game. Like my brother would be the cowboy, and me and my sisters would be the Indians. Like but now that I've learned about it, it's a really horrible game. It is just propagating American Indian stereotypes. Um, just like I would never run around as a kid playing black or playing Chinese. It's just not something um, that everybody really thinks about as bad, but it definitely is the more I've learned about it. I've learned also in this Maldish about singing red face and how people will wear red face just like people who wear blackface, like the blackface minstrelly, um, who were a group of white minstrels that traveled and they would paint their faces black to perform comedy and put on performances, kind of adding comedy to the history of slavery and racism. And singing red face is no better. People will dress up in native dress and paint their faces red, wear feathers, headdresses, um, just for their own, really their own like satisfaction to tell their own stories. But again, it's just propagating American Indian culture. I learned about rebel music. That I added this into my essay because rebel music was the video that we watched on MTV about the young American Indian musical artists, and they all stood for so many different um, movements against the cultural appropriation of their race and of their culture. They all were different. Like Frank Wong, he really just used his music to share his stories of his childhood and how hard it was growing up and dealing with the constant stereotypes and colonization. And then there was Inez Jasper, who was a huge advocate for the missing Indigenous women in America, who they're being targeted and keep going missing. So she was a big advocate for that, and she uses her music to bring positivity to people in her culture who also deal with the stereotypes. Um, and yeah, and then I also found one of my sources was in British Columbia. There was a musical, or it was an opera about about people who were wearing red face. White people who were wearing red face, they would dress in feathers and leather and red face and head dresses, and someone even quoted about, actually it was the director quoted about how it was racial impersonation and colonial masquerade, and so they knew that it was not great, but it was in the 50s, so they really didn't care. That was a time a long time ago before people were getting a lot more open, and they just used it because they wanted, really because they wanted it. They thought that it would really improve their story, I guess the story that they wrote about it. One what that was really interesting and really hit home for me was about the music festival, Basque Coast Festival, that banned wearing headdresses. I go to music festivals myself. They're really big in our youth culture, because a lot of the people we listen to, the popular music for us, they get together over like a weekend long festival and just have back-to-back concerts, and you stay there, and it's just so fun. But there are also places where people are known to dress to express themselves, since we can't necessarily dress crazy out in the everyday world because of social norms. People will wear tons of glitter, really just weird clothing that you would never ever see them wearing in real life, because they want the expression, they want the attention from it, they want eyes drawn on them. A lot of people like to be on the camera, so they try to dress crazy to be on the cameras. But some people have often been also wearing First Nations headdresses and war paint, as well as just wearing feathers, leather, dressing up as American Indians, because they think that it is eye-catching. Headdresses, but they're not traditional headdresses. They'll wear really big ones with like super colorful feathers and glitter, and just to try to catch eyes of people, but they don't really notice how it is maybe cultural confusion. And I don't think that they mean for it to be offensive, but even A Tribe Called Red, the First Nations DJ group that we learned about, said, I have, and I quote, I have yet to speak to someone who is First Nation who wears fake headdresses and war paint to EDM concerts. It's red face, just like blackface. So it is offensive to other cultures, just as if, just like when, let's say, a white girl goes out and gets cornrows. There are African Americans who take that as offensively, because that is a part of their culture. And Native Americans, a huge part of their culture is how they dress. And we learned a lot about that in this class. This whole unit was this whole class in general was very interesting to me. I'm very glad I got the opportunity to take it. It opened my eyes to so many different movements. I've really widespread worldwide ones that we've learned about is how we abolished slavery. Women have had so many new opportunities just constantly over the years. America's working really hard right now in the LGBTQ community to make them more equal in the world and let them love who they want to love. But I think that the racism towards American Indians isn't as well known, because it wasn't very apparent to me. I always kind of knew the stereotypes, but it just wasn't something that was the biggest issue. And I think that just comes from lack of knowledge, because it's not so out there. The only reason I heard about it was because of this class, because of the interviews I watched with people, the books that I read. And I think that if it became more of a populated issue and movement, that many more people would sign on to it, it would become way more worldwide, and more people would know, and make America as equal as we are hoping that it'll be someday. Thank you.